What I would say to them is what I've acknowledged for a number of years. 5 years ago, I made a serious mistake. I acknowledged it. I apologized for it. I paid a very heavy price for it, and I've learned from it. And again, they'll have to factor that in, and also, obviously, 38 and a half years of otherwise fairly, in some cases, unique service to our country in uniform and at the CIA, and then some 4 years or so in the business community, during which I've continued to travel the world, nearly 40 countries in that time as well.
That is General David Petraeus talking about people needing to balance what he's done in his life, particularly regarding the release of information to his biographer / girlfriend a few years ago that got him in trouble and lying about it. But he's arguing that there's other things in his career people should look at because he's one of the 5 or 6 people being looked at right now to be Secretary of State. And I would guess, based on the nature of the conversation about him, that he's probably a long shot at this point. So saying that, we do have a Twitter poll up today that we want to encourage you to go online and vote for. It has been posted, of course, by at Tony Colombo 971. We will repost it here at Mark Cox 971. And the question's very simple. The discussion about the next Secretary of State is heating up. So our Twitter poll for the day, brought to you by the Hair Salon for Men, who should the real Donald Trump choose? Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani, John Bolton, or John Huntsman? That's the new name that's been thrown into the mix in this whole race. And you know, I'm not a Huntsman fan. I'm not trying to put any bias in on the poll. We were limited to 4 names on this Twitter poll, by the way. If you're wondering why David Petraeus' name is not on here, Twitter limits you to 4 choices on these polls. So I took the ones I thought were probably the most likely candidates at this point, unless there's somebody that we don't know about. So go ahead and give us your vote. Tell us who you think Donald Trump should choose. Not who you think he's going to choose, who you think he should choose. And I know who my pick is, so I've already voted, and I will retweet it right now as we speak. And we've already got a number of votes. So get on there and tell us what you think at Tony Colombo 971, at Mark Cox 971, and we'll continue to talk about that. So right now, what I want to talk about is the Secretary of State pick and whether or not David Petraeus is a serious choice. He clearly has a distinguished record in the military. There's no doubt about that. He was asked this weekend during a round of interviews about the situation with his conviction. It was a misdemeanor conviction of giving that classified information to his biographer.
I made a false statement. At the time, I didn't think it was false. And frankly, I think if they had, they might have pursued that more. I'd also like to add, by the way, something that he left out, which is that the FBI in the agreement acknowledged that nothing that was in my journals that I shared, certainly improperly, ended up in the biography or made it out to the public.
So there you have it. That's Petraeus talking about what happened. The case, I think, to his probably disadvantage, was discussed a lot surrounding Hillary Clinton's email violations leading up to the election. I don't know how he fares well in that discussion, because everybody said, well, if David Petraeus got in trouble for what he did, certainly Hillary Clinton should get in trouble. The bottom line is she didn't. And I think that what she did was much more egregious. But that comparison was made a lot. And if indeed he pleaded guilty to that, can you really hand over the reins of the Secretary of State's title to him? I don't know. I mean, it's a fair question. Right now we're joined by Michael Hammond. He's the Legislative Counsel for the Gun Owners of America. Michael, how are you?
Hey, Mark, how about St. Louis?
Hey, how about that?
Trip down memory lane.
Yeah, you attended WashU, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, 4 tumultuous years of people spitting on me as I walked up and down the sidewalk because I wore a RASA uniform.
Oh, great. Sorry about that.
Well, and trying to jerk my clothes off also.
Did they really? Hopefully
Yeah,
those were
really.
women doing
they
that.
Had the barricade after they burned down our building in a mass torchlight parade. We started meeting on the quad, in one of the buildings on the quad, and basically they had this big barricade of garbage, and so I began to climb over the thing in order to get into class, and two girls grabbed my trousers of my uniform and began to try to jerk them off.
Oh, no. And today, the grandchildren of those people are protesting in the streets at San Diego State University, screaming, "Not my president, not my president."
Yeah, alternatively sitting in at 30 degrees below zero in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Yeah.
Which actually I have ancestors who were in Bismarck about 3,000 years ago. So one of my great joys of life is that I'm not in Bismarck right now freezing my little engine tail off.
I'll bet you are. The GOA has got an opinion on David Petraeus, who could potentially become our Secretary of State. We know that he had many years of service to this country in the military and the CIA. But what is the issue that you guys have with him?
Well, our issue is that after he got out of the military, he got together with Gabrielle Giffords, probably one of the two primary gun control advocates in this country now, Gabrielle Giffords and her husband Mark Kelly, and founded an anti-gun group called Veterans for Common Sense. And of course, when Petraeus says common sense, what he meant was the Giffords' gun agenda of semi-automatic bans, magazine bans, and universal gun registries. And so, I mean, there are various degrees of hating guns and hating guns, but you can hardly hate guns more than to be the central organizer of a group intended to abolish guns.
Right.
And Petraeus was.
Well, and as Secretary of State, he would be dealing with a number of things, maybe not directly with that UN gun treaty, but indirectly with it, certainly, right?
Whether or not we withdraw our signature from the UN Arms Trade Treaty and from the UN Small Arms Treaty. And if those things went into effect, basically what you get is mandatory gun registration and the ability of an anti-gun president to ban whatever classes of guns he wants. If he wants to ban semi-autos, that's okay. If he wants to ban handguns, that's okay. He doesn't need to get any legislation from Congress anymore because the Arms Trade Treaty provides him with the authority to do that, and that's treated under Missouri versus Holland as the equivalent of a statute.
Yeah,
and
that's
under
true.
The Supremacy Clause. So there's a whole lot riding at stake on who becomes Secretary of State in terms of guns. The Secretary of State has also promulgated under Clinton and Kerry what are called the International Trade in Arms Regulations, or the ITAR regulations. These ban gunsmithing. That is, if you have a gun and you take a tool to it and you do something other than something cosmetic, you need a $2,250 State Department license in order to do that, or else you're a criminal. If you post how-to information on the Internet with respect to something on the State Department's munitions list, then you are guilty of a crime unless you have a $2,250 State Department license for posting something on the Internet. So the State Department has put itself pretty much right in the middle of the issue of gun control, and who the next Secretary of State is going to have a major impact on what direction that department goes.
So we're talking to Michael Hammond from Gun Owners of America. Is GOA going to endorse somebody who's currently on that list, or are there other candidates that we've discussed here who would be your preference?
No, there are plenty of bad candidates on the list. They just put Senator Manchin of West Virginia, senator from West Virginia, on the list, noted for his advocacy of the Manchin-Toomey, basically gun registry bill. Mitt Romney signed semi-auto ban when he was in Massachusetts, and basically his new attorney general Healy has now interpreted that to basically de facto ban all semi-autos in Massachusetts, all of them, no matter what features they have, with or without grandfathering any of them. So there are a lot of bad candidates, but it's hard to be worse than to create one of the central anti-gun groups in the anti-gun movement. Incidentally, I might add that when I started centuries ago, working on Capitol Hill under Senator James Buckley of New York, my counterpart in Covington Burling, the young pup who was the counterpart to my young pup on the legislative side, was a junior associate in Covington Burling named John Bolton.
Ah.
And I kept saying, wow, well, once he makes partner, he'll get rid of that weird face hair. But it was not to be. But no, John Bolton would be great. I think Rudy Giuliani probably has done a lot. When everyone else was calling Donald Trump Hitler, Giuliani was bravely standing up and defending him. So I think he certainly has earned consideration, at least. But I guess our position is there are some candidates who aren't great on guns on the short list in the State Department, but it's hard to be worse on guns than to set up an anti-gun organization aimed at banning guns.
That's a good point. Just off the top of my head here, do you know anything about Nikki Haley and her stance on that, since she's going to be the UN ambassador?
If you're governor of South Carolina, you can't be really, really anti-gun.
That's true.
And I think, she's, where Nikki Haley is, sort of trying to be liked by everyone. But no, I'm sure that her record in South Carolina was reasonably pro-gun.
Michael Hammond, listen, thanks for your time. I'll direct people to the website, GOA.org. The Gun Owners of America, they do a lot of good work there on our behalf, so definitely get on the website there and check them out.
Thank you.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We got Michael Hammond. We got a little bit of history lesson on some of the strife at Washington University years ago when they were harassing members of ROTC, I'm assuming during the Vietnam War. Michael didn't tell me the time frame, but I'm guessing that's when because if you walked across the campus of Wash U today and two co-eds tried to pull your pants down, I'm not sure that anybody would have raised any cane about that. So it must have been a different time period.